The rain hammered against Vesper's cabin door like bullets, and she nearly dropped her steaming mug of tea when the desperate knocking began. 3 years of solitude in the Montana wilderness had taught her that visitors meant trouble, especially at midnight during a storm that could kill. She peered through the rain-streaked window and saw him, a tall figure hunched over something precious, his clothes plastered to his body by the relentless downpour. Lightning illuminated his face for a split second, revealing sharp cheekbones and eyes wild with panic. "Please." His voice cut through the thunder. "My daughter, she's burning up with fever." Vesper's hand froze on the door handle. The last man who'd stood on her porch had shattered her world, left her pregnant and alone, then vanished when she'd lost the baby 6 months later. She'd sworn never to trust again, never to open her door to a stranger's plea, but the soft whimper of a child changed everything. She yanked the door open, and he stumbled inside, water streaming from his dark hair. In his arms lay a baby girl, maybe 18 months old, her tiny face flushed scarlet with fever. "I'm Caspian," he gasped, his accent carrying hints of somewhere Mediterranean. "My truck broke down 15 miles back. She's been sick for hours." "And the storm, kitchen table," Vesper commanded, her medical training from her previous life kicking in. She'd been a pediatric nurse before the world had crushed her heart. Now, as he laid the child down, their hands brushed, and something electric shot through Vesper's body, not attraction, but recognition, as if her soul knew his. The baby's temperature was dangerously high, her breathing shallow. "What's her name?" Vesper asked, already pulling supplies from her emergency kit. "Lua," he whispered, and his voice cracked. "She's all I have left." While Vesper worked to bring down the fever, she caught glimpses of Caspian's story in his desperate murmurs. His wife had died in childbirth. He'd been running from something or someone. The way his eyes darted to the windows, the tension in his shoulders, told her he was a man haunted. "She'd be okay," Vesper said an hour later as Lua's fever finally broke. "But she needs rest, and so do you." Caspian slumped against the wall, exhaustion etched in every line of his face. "I can't pay you. I have nothing left." "I didn't ask for payment." He studied her then, really looked at her for the first time. Vesper felt exposed under his gaze, aware of her wild copper hair, her paint-stained fingers, the loneliness that clung to her like perfume. "Why?" he asked simply. The question hung between them like a bridge neither dared cross. Because she understood loss. Because his daughter's cry had awakened something maternal she'd thought died with her miscarriage. Because looking at him felt like coming home to a place she'd never been. "Because it's what people do," she lied. Thunder crashed overhead, and Lua stirred in her sleep, reaching tiny fingers toward nothing. Caspian caught her hand gently, and Vesper's heart clenched at the tenderness in the gesture. "The storm won't clear until morning," she heard herself saying. "You can stay." Vesper woke to the smell of coffee and something she'd forgotten existed. Sound of another person moving through her space. For a moment, terror gripped her. Then she remembered Caspian Lua, the storm. She found him in her kitchen, shirtless, his wet clothes draped over chairs by the fire. His back was a map of scars, some old and silver, others newer and angry red. He'd found her coffee, her bread, and somehow conjured breakfast from her sparse supplies. "I hope you don't mind," he said without turning around. Lua woke hungry. It's fine." The words came out rougher than intended. 3 years of solitude had made her voice rusty with disuse. He handed her a mug, and again their fingers touched. This time, the jolt was impossible to ignore. He felt it too, she saw it in the way his pupils dilated, the sharp intake of breath. "Tell me about the scars," she said, then immediately regretted the boldness. Caspian's jaw tightened. Tell me why you live like a ghost in the middle of nowhere. Fair enough. They were both refugees from something. Lua babbled happily from her makeshift bed on the couch, playing with wooden blocks Vesper had carved during endless winter nights. The sight of the child surrounded by her creations did something strange to Vesper's chest. I used to be a nurse, she found herself saying. Pediatric ICU in Denver. I was good at it. I was also engaged to a surgeon who said he loved me. Caspian leaned against the counter, listening with an intensity that made her skin warm. I got pregnant, lost the baby at 20 weeks. He said it was for the best. We weren't ready. His career was taking off. When I realized he'd been relieved about the miscarriage, I walked away from everything and came here. She sipped her coffee. It was perfect. Your turn. His laugh was bitter. I was a translator for international companies. Spoke 7 languages, traveled constantly. Met Irina in Prague. She was a journalist, beautiful, fearless. We had 6 months together before she got pregnant. He paused, watching Lua stack blocks with determined concentration. She died giving birth. Complications. I held Lua while Irina bled out, and I couldn't do anything. Couldn't translate death into life, couldn't find words in any language to make it stop. Vesper's throat constricted. I'm sorry. Her father blamed me. Said I'd corrupted her, led her away from her family. He's powerful and Czech Republic has connections everywhere. He wants Lua, says I'm unfit. I've been running for months. Is that why you're here? My truck broke down, but maybe. He met her eyes. Maybe it was supposed to. Maybe we were supposed to find you. The words hung in the air like a promise neither of them was ready to make. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the world crystal clear and blindingly bright. Caspian should leave now. Take Lua and disappear before Vesper's carefully constructed walls crumbled completely. Instead, he said, what if we stayed another day? Lua's still recovering, and the roads will be muddy. Every rational part of Vesper screamed no. But Lua chose that moment to toddle over, clutching one of the wooden blocks, and press it into Vesper's hands like a gift. The child's smile was radiant, trusting, and it shattered something inside Vesper she'd thought was permanently broken. One more day, she whispered. She didn't see Caspian smile, but she felt it warm the air between them like sunrise. The one more day stretched into a week, then 2. Vesper told herself it was practical. Caspian's truck needed parts. Lua was still fragile from her illness. The weather remained unpredictable, but the truth was simpler and more terrifying. She was falling in love with both of them. Caspian fixed everything that was broken in her cabin, the leaky roof, the stubborn door, the generator that wheezed like an old man. In return, Vesper taught Lua words in English while Caspian murmured to her in Czech, creating a linguistic symphony that made the cabin feel alive again. Vesper, Lua would say, reaching chubby arms up to be held, and something inside Vesper melted completely each time. The nights were the hardest. They'd established routines. Caspian slept on the couch, Lua in a crib he'd crafted from wood scraps, Vesper alone in her bed. But she could feel him through the thin walls, could sense his restlessness matching her own. On Tuesday night, she found him outside, staring at stars that seemed close enough to touch in the thin mountain air. Can't sleep? She asked. I keep thinking about what happens next. His voice was raw. I can't run forever, Vesper. Lua needs stability, needs a home. And what do you need? He turned to her then, and the moonlight turned his eyes silver. You know what I need. The space between them crackled with tension. Vesper's heart hammered against her ribs as he stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his skin. Could see the pulse beating in his throat. I can't, she whispered. I can't lose anyone else. What if you don't have to lose me? What if we stopped running, all of us? His hand cupped her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. I see how you look at her. How you look at me. This isn't just about shelter anymore. He was right. Somewhere between teaching Lua to stack blocks and watching Caspian sing Czech lullabies, Vesper had started imagining a different life. A life where her cabin rang with laughter instead of silence, where she woke to coffee and conversation, instead of crushing loneliness. But wanting something and being brave enough to reach for it were different beasts entirely. What about Irina's father? What about— Caspian silenced her with a kiss that tasted like hope and desperation in equal measure. His lips were soft but demanding, and Vesper felt 3 years of careful numbness shatter like glass dot when they broke apart, both breathing hard. He pressed his forehead against hers. "Let me worry about the rest," he murmured. "Let me worry about everything except this." Through the window, they could see Lua sleeping peacefully, one tiny fist curled around the wooden heart Vesper had carved for her. The sight of the child there. Child, because that's what she'd become, made Vesper's decision. "Okay," she breathed. "Okay, but if we do this, if we try this, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you won't disappear. Promise me that if this gets hard, if the running gets dangerous, you won't just vanish with her. I couldn't survive that." Caspian's eyes blazed with something fierce and protective. "I promise you'll never wake up to find us gone. Whatever comes, we face it together." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Vesper let herself fall. 3 months later, Vesper's cabin had transformed into something unrecognizable, a home bursting with color and laughter. Lua's artwork decorated the walls, Caspian's books filled the shelves, and the silence that had once been Vesper's only companion was replaced by the beautiful chaos of family life. They'd fallen into rhythms that felt natural as breathing. Mornings began with Caspian making coffee while Vesper braided Lua's dark hair. Afternoons meant walks through the forest, Lua riding on Caspian's shoulders while pointing out birds and flowers in her growing trilingual vocabulary. Evenings were for stories by the fire, for stolen kisses when Lua wasn't looking, for the kind of contentment Vesper had thought existed only in fairy tales. But fairy tales, Vesper reminded herself as she watched a black SUV wind up the mountain road, always had monsters. Caspian. Her voice cut through the morning air like a blade. He looked up from where he was teaching Lua to whittle, saw the vehicle, and his face went deadly pale. "Take her inside. Now, Papa?" Lua sensed the tension, her lower lip trembling. Vesper scooped up the little girl, heart hammering as 2 men in expensive suits climbed out of the SUV. The older one had Lua's dark eyes but none of her warmth. "Irina's father." "Caspian Novak," the man said in heavily accented English. "You have led us quite a chase, Grandfather Victor." Caspian's voice was steady, but Vesper could see his hands shaking. "You have no right to be here." "I have every right to my granddaughter." Victor's gaze shifted to the cabin, where Vesper stood in the doorway with Lua pressed against her shoulder. "And you have no right to involve innocence in your selfishness." The second man stepped forward, and Vesper's blood ran cold when she saw the gun barely concealed beneath his jacket. "Let me make this simple," Victor continued. "You will give me Lua and you will disappear, forever. In exchange, I will not press charges for kidnapping. I will not destroy whatever pathetic life you've built here." "She's my daughter," Caspian said, but his voice cracked on the words. "She is Irina's daughter. She deserves better than a fugitive father and whatever this woman is to you." Vesper felt Lua's small body trembling and made a decision that surprised even her. She stepped out of the cabin, chin raised, every inch of her radiating protective fury. "My name is Vesper Thorne," she said clearly. "I'm a registered nurse, a property owner, and as of yesterday, Caspian's wife." The lie rolled off her tongue smooth as silk, and she saw Caspian's eyes widen in shock. "We were married by the county judge," she continued, pulling a simple gold band off her right hand and sliding it onto her left. "Lua is legally my stepdaughter now. So if you want to take her, you'll have to go through the American legal system, and me." Victor's smile was reptilian. "Marriage certificates can be destroyed, Mrs. Novak. Accidents can happen to anyone." The threat hung in the mountain air like smoke. Vesper felt Lua's tiny hand fist in her hair, and something primal and fierce rose in her chest. "Then you'd better hope you're faster than the FBI agent who's been monitoring this area for drug trafficking," she said smoothly. "He's a friend of mine. Checks in regularly." Another lie, but it landed like a punch. Victor's eyes narrowed, calculating. "This isn't over," he said finally. "Lua belongs with family." "She is with family," Vesper replied. "She's with people who love her more than power or revenge." As the SUV disappeared down the mountain, Caspian pulled both Vesper and Lua into his arms, his whole body shaking. "Wife?" he murmured against Vesper's ear. "It seemed like a good idea at the time. It's the best idea you've ever had." The wedding happened 3 days later in the tiny courthouse in town, with Lua as their only witness and the mountain peaks as their cathedral. Vesper wore a simple white dress she'd owned for years. Caspian borrowed a suit from the judge, and they spoke vows that felt truer than any words either had ever uttered. "I promise to love both of you," Vesper whispered, her eyes moving between Caspian and Lua through whatever storms come. "I promise to never run again," Caspian replied, sliding a ring onto her finger. "This is home. You are home." Lua clapped when they kissed, shouting, "Mama!" "Papa!" in delighted check, and Vesper's heart expanded until she thought it might burst. Their happiness was shadowed by the knowledge that Victor wouldn't give up easily. They'd bought time, not safety. That night, as Lua slept between them in the big bed they'd finally started sharing, Caspian traced patterns on Vesper's bare shoulder. "I have money," he said quietly. "Hidden accounts. We could disappear all of us. Start over somewhere he'd never find us." "Is that what you want? To keep running?" Caspian was quiet for a long moment. 5 months ago, yes, but now ... He gestured around the cabin at the life they'd built. "This is the first place I've ever felt like I belonged. And watching you with Lua, seeing how she lights up when you sing to her, when you braid her hair, I can't take that away from either of you." Vesper turned to face him, moonlight painting silver streaks across his chest. "Then we don't run. We fight. He has resources, connections, and we have something he doesn't." Vesper pressed her palm over Caspian's heart. "We have love that's stronger than fear. We have each other." The next morning brought an unexpected ally. Sheriff Martinez arrived with coffee and news that made Vesper's blood run cold and her heart soar simultaneously. "Your father-in-law's been asking questions in town," Martinez said, settling into a kitchen chair while Lua colored at the table. "But turns out some of those questions involve things that interest federal authorities." "What kind of things?" Caspian asked. "Money laundering. International fraud. Seems Mr. Dvorak's business empire isn't as clean as it appears." Martinez sipped her coffee. "FBI's been building a case for years. They'd be very interested in talking to someone with inside knowledge of his operations." Vesper saw the moment. Caspian understood. "You want me to testify. I want you to help put a dangerous man away so he can't hurt your family anymore." It was risky. Testifying would mean going back to Colorado, facing Victor in court, reliving the nightmare of losing Irina. But it would also mean freedom, real freedom, not the borrowed time they'd been living on. "What about Lua?" Vesper asked. "If he's arrested, protective custody during the trial. After that, if he's convicted, his custody claims disappear." You'd be free to raise her without looking over your shoulders. That afternoon, while Lua napped and Caspian made phone calls to federal prosecutors, Vesper walked to the spot where they'd first kissed. The aspen trees were turning gold, painting the mountainside in shades of fire and honey. She thought about the woman she'd been when Caspian first knocked on her door broken, isolated, convinced that love was just another way to get hurt. That woman seemed like a stranger now. When Caspian found her there, she was ready with her answer. "We do this," she said simply. "Together." He pulled her close and she could feel his heartbeat against her cheek, steady and strong. "Together," he agreed. In 6 weeks, they'd fly to Denver for the trial that would determine their future. But tonight, they had each other and a little girl who called them both home, and that felt like more than enough to face whatever came next. The federal courthouse in Denver was a monument of granite and glass that seemed designed to intimidate, but Vesper felt steady as she and Caspian walked through the metal detectors. Lua was safe with Martinez back in Montana, surrounded by people who'd fallen in love with her infectious giggle and boundless curiosity. Victor sat at the defendant's table looking every inch the respectable businessman in his tailored suit, but Vesper had learned to see past facades. His eyes were cold calculation, his smile a weapon honed by years of getting what he wanted through fear and manipulation. "Mr. Novak," the prosecutor began, "please tell the court about your relationship with the defendant." Caspian's voice was steady as he recounted meeting Irina, their whirlwind romance, her death. But it was when he described Victor's reaction to becoming a grandfather that the courtroom grew silent. He said Lua was his now, that I was temporary, expendable. He'd already hired investigators to find leverage against me, ways to prove I was unfit. Caspian's hands were clenched in his lap. When I refused to sign over custody, he made it clear that accidents could happen to people who stood in his way. "Objection," Victor's lawyer called, but the damage was done. The jury had seen the truth in Caspian's eyes. The prosecution painted a picture of a man who viewed people as possessions, who'd built an empire on threats and corruption. Financial records showed money flowing through shell companies, bribes to officials, payments to people who made problems. Disappeared. When it was Victor's lawyer's turn, he painted Caspian as an irresponsible fugitive who'd stolen a child and hidden her away with a woman he barely knew. "Mrs. Novak," the defense attorney said on cross-examination, his tone dripping condescension, "you married the defendant after knowing him for only 3 months. Isn't it true that you were simply a lonely woman desperate for a family, willing to involve yourself in a custody dispute that had nothing to do with you?" Vesper met his gaze without flinching. "I married Caspian because I love him. And I love Lua because she's an extraordinary little girl who deserves to be protected from men who see her as property instead of a person." "But you're not her biological family." "Family isn't about biology," Vesper said, her voice ringing clear through the courtroom. "It's about showing up. It's about 3 a.m. fevers and bedtime stories and teaching someone to believe they're worthy of unconditional love. Lua has that with us. She's never had that with her grandfather." The lawyer tried to shake her testimony, but Vesper had found her strength. She spoke about the night they'd arrived, about watching Caspian with his daughter, about the way Lua had bloomed in an environment of safety and love. On the 4th day of trial, Victor himself took the stand. His composure cracked when the prosecutor presented recordings, conversations with associates about removing obstacles and permanent solutions. His voice turned arctic when asked about his son-in-law. "He corrupted my daughter, led her away from her family and values. When she died because of his influence, he stole my granddaughter and fled like a coward." "And if you regain custody of Lua?" Victor's smile was sharp as broken glass. "She would learn to be a proper Czech daughter. She would forget the man who killed her mother and the woman who enabled his selfishness. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When they returned with guilty verdicts on all counts, Vesper felt years of fear leave her body in a rush that left her dizzy. 25 years to life. Victor's empire crumbling under federal investigation. Most importantly, his parental rights permanently terminated. Outside the courthouse, with Denver's skyline gleaming in autumn sunlight, Caspian pulled Vesper into a kiss that tasted like freedom and forever. "It's over," he whispered against her lips. "No," Vesper corrected, thinking of Lua waiting for them at home, of the life they were free to build without shadows. "It's just beginning." 2 years later, Vesper stood in the same spot where she'd once kissed Caspian under the stars, but everything else had changed. The cabin had grown new rooms, a proper nursery, a workshop where Caspian crafted furniture and Vesper carved the toys that had become surprisingly popular at the local craft fairs. "Mama!" Lua's voice carried across the meadow where she was picking wildflowers with Martinez, who'd become something between grandmother and guardian angel. At 3.5, Lua spoke English and Czech with equal fluency, but her heart was pure Montana mountain child. Vesper's hand moved instinctively to her rounded belly, where their second daughter was growing strong and active. They'd wanted to give Lua a sibling, but more than that, they'd wanted to create the family they'd all been searching for without knowing it. "How are you feeling?" Caspian asked, sliding his arms around her from behind, his palms settling over her belly. "Like the luckiest woman alive," she answered honestly. They'd named the baby growing inside her sage for wisdom earned through suffering, for the wild herbs that grew on their mountain, for new growth in places that had seemed barren. Lua was convinced her little sister would share her love of adventure and had already started teaching her Czech lullabies through Vesper's skin. "Mama, Papa." Lua came running with a fistful of Indian paintbrush, her dark hair flying behind her like a banner. "For baby Sage." She pressed the flowers gently against Vesper's belly, then leaned close to whisper secrets to her unborn sister. The sight never failed to make Vesper's eyes water with pure joy. That evening, as they sat around the fire pit Caspian had built, Lua asleep in his lap and Sage doing somersaults inside Vesper's womb, they talked about dreams that had once seemed impossible. "Remember that first night?" Vesper asked. "When you were so afraid to ask if you could stay? I was afraid you'd say no. I was more afraid you'd say yes." Caspian's fingers combed through Lua's hair as she slept. "I thought I was too broken for this, too dangerous. We were all broken," Vesper said. "That's what made us perfect for each other." Martinez had stayed for dinner, and now she sat across the fire watching them with satisfaction. "You know," she said, "I've been sheriff here for 20 years. Seen a lot of people come through these mountains, running from something or toward something. Most of them don't stay long. This is different?" Vesper asked. "This is home," Martinez replied. "You can see it in how the land holds you, how you hold each other." Later, after Martinez had gone and they tucked Lua into her bed, Vesper and Caspian stood on their porch looking at stars that seemed close enough to touch. The silence was comfortable, full of shared understanding and dreams taking shape. "I love you," Caspian said suddenly, as if the words still surprised him. "I love you too," Vesper replied. "Both of you, all of us, even when Sage keeps you awake all night? Especially then." He laughed, the sound rich and free, and Vesper marveled at how much they'd both changed. The man who'd knocked on her door that stormy night had been desperate and haunted. Now he was settled in his skin, confident in his place in the world. And she was no longer the woman who'd lived like a ghost, afraid to love because love meant losing. She was a mother, a wife, a partner in building something beautiful from the ashes of what had been. "What are you thinking about?" Caspian asked. "Storms," she said. "How sometimes they bring exactly what you need, even when you don't know you need it." A year later, when Sage took her first steps across the cabin floor into her big sister's waiting arms, Vesper would remember this moment, the peace, the certainty, the absolute rightness of a life built on love brave enough to weather. Any storm got the little girl who'd arrived with a fever had brought healing to them all. The man who'd begged for one night had given them forever. And the woman who'd lived alone had learned that the best families aren't the ones you're born into. They're the ones who choose you back, again and again, through whatever comes. Outside, the mountain wind sang through the aspens, and inside, their hearts beat in rhythm with home.